So I had the opportunity to watch Rollo Tomassi's take on passport bros being in the cope. Now, the real cope for most American men is whatever excuse you have to use to not push back against the government, whether it's red pill, whether it's monk, MGTOW, whether it's, looks maxing, whether it's, hitting the gym, whether you got to be a high value man, all that is cope. Because at the end of the day, most men collectively are afraid to push back against the government. Some men have opted, realistically speaking, to say, you know what? There are better women abroad. This is a huge planet. This is a big world. My world doesn't have to be wherever I was born. There's some people that never left their block, let alone their state, let alone their country. And when you leave your area, what you gain is perspective. And so there have been some YouTubers that talk about, well, you need to have an abundance mentality when it comes to women. And I would say, how do you have an abundance mentality in a country where 80% of the women are overweight and 43% are obese and 10% of the country are diabetic? How do you have an abundance mindset in a world, or I should say, in a country where most of the women don't even qualify as a significant other, as a girlfriend, as a potential wife, let alone feminism and the laws? And so for some people to sit here and say, these men who are going abroad, I would say the biggest mistake that many of these men make, as someone who utilizes his passport and only dates abroad. I stopped dating in America back in like 2017. I lived in Manhattan for a very long time. And when the date scene in Manhattan changed, when the concept of a woman who has been drinking and sleeps with you at a bar can turn around and the next day say, I really couldn't consent. Meanwhile, you had also been drinking. That was the end of dating in the bar scene. And it completely killed the bar scene in New York. I lived in Manhattan for about 10 years. And once that happened, I saw very dramatically how the bar scene was basically killed. And it was no longer worth living in the city. And then, of course, the pandemic hit and it just got even worse. The crime got out of control. The wealthy people have left, etc. But for people to sit here, especially for many of these content creators that are talking about how, well, you're just using this as a cope. You're just going over there because you're going to be at the top of the food chain in terms of hypergamy. And it's like, well, what's wrong with that? You're just using your ability to take the dollar and maximize your gains in terms of being able, your purchasing power to the best of your ability. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's like someone utilizing their height, or someone who can gain muscle very quickly, or someone who has the gift of gab, or someone who has a unique skill and they're able to, gain money and use that as a resource. But the biggest reason, of course, is because you are a commodity. What do I mean by that? Is that for many of these men who are groping around and looking for answers and trying to find a way out. How can I find success in relationships? For many of them, they turn to YouTube, they turn to social media, and many of these YouTube personalities that talk about, well, if you just do this, if you just gain enough money, if you just hit the gym hard enough, if you just, wear these type of clothing, if you're just smooth in this way, then you'll be just fine. And the reality is that is not the case. Because everything in America, the way that America is, I should say, the way that this plantation is geared is towards extracting as much wealth from men as possible. They're already doing it with the women by getting women to opt out of childbirth and to go into colleges and become debt slaves and then go on the hamster wheel of being an employee in many of these companies. And it's because women spend a lot, and because men typically curtail women's spending and vote right. So I've done many videos talking about this. When you have married women typically vote right. And what I mean by right is they vote for smaller government. Why? Lower taxes. It's not because they're right wing. It's because they don't want the government to tax their men who they're dependent upon, because they want those resources allocated to them and to their children. They don't want them allocated to single mothers or to single women. But if you're a single mother and you have a hard time finding a man, then you typically are left-leaning, aka you vote for the expansion of money, or you vote for the expansion of the government, which serves the purpose of extracting wealth. And in that environment, there is no point in dating any of these women. In my opinion, you should not be dating westernized women. You should not be dating in the West. You open yourself up to the extraction of wealth. And so that's why I choose to date abroad. You can date in Mexico. You can find a woman in Southeast Asia or in Eastern Europe or in Latin America, staying away from places like Argentina and Spain because they are left-leaning. And it's not so much that they're left-leaning, it's more related to whether or not women and people can vote to take your money away. And that's really what matters. And that's the biggest problem in America, is that at the end of the day, women who are the majority of voters can just vote to extract resources from men. That's why you saw Joe Biden get placed into office. Who was it by? By women. What did Joe Biden run on? He ran on college debt. And who hold the majority of college debt? Women. And so when you look at the stats, overwhelmingly women voted for Joe Biden, especially single mothers and single women, because they need the government to extract wealth from men. And so it has nothing to do with you're going abroad because of hypergamy. Women are going to be women no matter where you go, but the laws are going to be different, and that's what matters. For people that are talking about that passport bros is a cope, or that these people are going abroad because they're predators, it's like, maybe there are some people that are doing that. Maybe there are some people that are going there for sex tourism. I see that myself. When I was in Medellin. When I went to Medellin, what I saw was young black men and old white men, and all of them interacting with many of these women that are prostitutes. But you don't have to go to Medellin. You can go to other places. There's a lot of other places that you can go to find a wife. And the biggest issue among men is that men, especially nowadays, are very promiscuous, and they don't want to live a moral life. And so a tenet of red pill philosophy is that women adapt to the environment that you put them in. And so if you put women in an environment where unless they're promiscuous, you won't interact with them, right? Many content creators say, well, if she's not sleeping with you, well, then she's definitely sleeping with somebody else. So you don't want to be the blue pill provider while someone else is banging her out. And so what do they teach you? They teach you to be promiscuous. They teach you need to sleep with her on the first or second, or at the very least by the third date. And so a woman who's desirous of a relationship, what is she supposed to do? If she doesn't put out, well, then the men aren't going to interact with her in that way. They're going to think less of her. And so they're just going to think, the man's mentality will be, well, she must be sleeping with other people. And so they won't interact with her if she doesn't sleep with them. So what is a woman to do? Women adapt to the environment that men place them in. And so if the men are promiscuous, then the women will adapt to promiscuity. And that's why American women are so promiscuous. And in any country, that's why you look at like Muslim countries and you don't see the same level of promiscuity. Why? Because the men aren't promiscuous. And so as a result, they hold the women accountable. But in a country where the men don't want to be held accountable, right? I mean, 23%, almost 25% of all American children are raised by single women, by single mothers. 1/4 of all children are raised by single mothers. Well, who are creating these babies? Men. Men are creating these single mothers. And so as much as we want to blame women, the problem is men. Because women are just adapting. Women are just adapting to the environment that men are creating for them. Because women do not have the ability to create their own environment, because they don't have the force, they don't have the strength. They don't have the ability to impose their will on the world in such a way that the world adapts to the men, that adapts to them. Women adapt to the environment that men put them in. And it's not that men in America are afraid of the women because of what's going to happen. It's not the women that are taking resources away from men, it's other men. What men are afraid of is the repercussions of going against the state, i.e. other men, not women. Who the fuck cares? What are women going to do? Women ain't going to do shit. Just look at Afghanistan. When they pushed out the American army and the Americans left, did the women shoulder their rifle? No. All those feminist women went right back to the kitchen and made their men a fucking sandwich. And there was no women out there that were ready to shoulder their rifle. That concept that American women would do that is just not realistic. What men are afraid of the government fighting back against those men. And realistically speaking, they're like, well, we get all the sex that we want. You don't have to commit to women. Shit, you can have kids out of wedlock. You don't have to worry about it. The government will pay for it in some instances, or they'll just put you on child support, etc. And overwhelmingly, the problem is men. That's why when many of these passport bros go into other countries, they create the exact same problem, because they take their promiscuity and then they go to other countries. And then what do? They exchange their money for sex. And it creates the same problem over there. So now the women that are over there adapt to the environment, and they adapt to hypergamy, and they start seeking out sex tourism because they can make money out of it easier than going and getting a job, or going and laying up under another man and letting that man support him. And so it's overwhelmingly, the issue is men, and it's the promiscuity of men, and it leads to degeneracy. And that is exactly what we have. But if you're a person who is looking for a relationship, and regardless of how good the woman is, the system is not designed for you to have a relationship, because of the constant propaganda that is pushed towards women, and even more so now towards your children. They're educated in these indoctrination camps, and they come out confused. They come out misdirected in life. They're raised to be favorable to the state. They're raised to be loyal to the state. They're not raised to be loyal to you as a parent. You don't have the authority as a father. And so you should not be dating Western women. What you should be doing is you should be getting a skill, acquiring wealth, and investing abroad in a country where that exists, where the laws are more favorable to you to have a family. Hypergamy will always be the same. Women will always seek the best mate that they can. Just like many men will do the exact same thing. They'll try to find the prettiest woman that they think will make a good mother and will bear their children. But going abroad and sleeping around, and this is typically what you see on YouTube. That's why you see all these YouTubers that go to Salsua, or they go to Medellin. Why? Because that's where all the sex tourism is. And that's what is so popular on YouTube. Why? Because men are promiscuous in America. And so this whole concept, this whole life, this culture starts to spread. The spreading of American culture of promiscuity. The backlash is what we have in America. And that's why many countries don't like Americans, because they're always trying to impose their will on other people. You see it with like the Muslim countries, right? When America, they spread feminism and the global homo in all these different countries, and people don't like it. But at the end of the day, there's not much they can do about it, because they're not able to fight back. But if you're a man who's looking for a relationship, you can do it abroad. There's no reason to date American women, regardless of whether she's a good person or not. It doesn't even matter. Because at the end of the day, not only do you have to fight against the propaganda, but you also have to fight against the influence of the state and the culture that exists in America. And if she just wants to up and leave one day and extract as much resources as she can from you, it's just not worth the risk. The benefit and risk is just not worth it. And so if you're looking for a relationship, do it abroad. Buy some property abroad, acquire a skill, and start a business abroad. Have your investments here, they'll be protected. Put them in a trust. If you invest abroad, put them in a trust, and you'll do just fine. But if you're going to go abroad to live this promiscuous lifestyle, to sleep around, all you're going to do is create the exact same scenario over there that exists over here. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.